And then many times people will put up a bad Yelp review and never go back to the restaurant again.
Correct.
I can't even tell you how many times that happens.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
absolutely.
paramount. You've got to have your
Yes.
ducks in a row. Welcome to Mastering Restaurant Revenue, turning restaurant dreams into significant profits. We're your hosts, Bruce Russo, 550 plus restaurant concepts designed and built, and a tower of national and regional awards. He's the GOAT of restaurant design and build for money-making operations. And I'm Diane Armitage, 30 years leading a global marketing agency. I help restaurants design not just a space, but a profit machine. Every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., you can find us on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel. Just search Mastering Restaurant Revenue. And please like, subscribe, and share at our channel. Much appreciated. And our website, oddly the same name, Mastering Restaurant Revenue, sends you an email reminder when the podcast drops and gets you involved in contests and live Q&A episodes with us with prizes that might even include you coming on our show. Usually our contests show up on the weekends. Fair warning out there. Okay, so Bruce, we are talking about restaurant revenue and revenue pods in restaurants and how we create all these different pods of revenue to help us do the three foundational things to increase our business, which is bringing in new clients, new numbers of clients, increasing the transaction, and increasing the number of times they come back, which was the episode that we just did previously. Now, we wanted to talk about using an example of just bar menu and what you can do to make that into three revenue pods, basically, how you work a bar menu versus what Bruce calls a cocktail table menu versus what you do with appetizers on your main dining menu. Okay? So we're going to start with this and try to give you some new ideas on how this all operates. So, Bruce, in most cases, when I go into restaurants, many, many times they will throw the entire dining menu down in the bar. The whole menu is available to me in the bar. For me, that's the first mistake. But what do you think about that?
It's a huge mistake.
It's
a huge mistake because you have to control the pot of revenue. So if you put a menu at the bar with 30 items on it, you're not controlling anything. If you create a cocktail menu, I want you to come in, spend 10 minutes and drink a cocktail. And I want you to buy a little nibble. The cocktail menu should be nibbles.
Which is different than the bar revenue menu.
Exactly. Because, a cocktail menu should be, let's give you an example, like Skittles. I'm not saying Skittles, but something that was made in that size, it's just something to nibble on.
Correct.
To help with the cocktail.
Correct.
We want to control that to be 10 to 12 minutes and then get them to either go at the bar and stay at the bar or go to the dining room. Typically, it would be go to the dining room.
So with the cocktail table menu, you need something that is fast prep, that's already prepped, that you have to do very little with in the kitchen to get it out to the cocktail table.
Correct.
Because what you're doing is putting those people in for one drink and maybe one or two nibbles. That's it.
Correct.
So then your restaurant wants to look at what can our prep kitchen do for us that is something that we can unwrap and take out, or something that we can quickly unwrap, throw into a fryer, throw into a grill, a saute pan for 30 seconds, and it's out the door.
Yes. I mean, it could be something as simple as 2 ounces of cut up cheese, pieces of cheese, or, 3 pieces of celery, and simple things that take a nanosecond to get plated and put at the table. Because we want that little nibble to be at the table like maybe 60 to 120 seconds prior to the cocktail getting there.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
So even
Now
and we're thinking nibbles. We're talking nibbles, people. So we're not
correct.
doing a whole charcuterie platter
No,
with
no,
19
no,
different kinds of meat.
no, no,
We're
no.
doing a miniature charcuterie platter,
Correct.
that kind of a thing.
Yes.
Because you don't want
A
to fill them
nibble.
up.
It's just a nibble. And
You just want them
then,
to have something with the liquor, the drink.
correct. The next step would be the bar menu. And the bar menu should have nothing to do with the dining room.
Correct.
The bar menu, again, should be developed. That menu should be developed for speed and ease in the kitchen. It has to be a turn and burn kind of app. So it's either going to be fried or it's going to be a charcuterie or something that's easy that it could be the ticket could come up, it could be
Edamame.
printed, correct, and put on a plate in 3 to 5 minutes while their cocktail order is being processed at the bar.
Correct.
Because the bar, they're not sitting there for 3 minutes. They're going to sit there and they're going to chat. And typically it's in a group setting. I would say on average, it's more of a group setting at the bar than it is onesie twosie. You're going to get a lot of onesie twosie, but I think it's more group than it is onesie twosie.
Correct. Yeah.
And they're either going to do nothing but just do the bar and then finish and leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably a 30% thing for somebody to spend an hour at the bar and do an app at the bar and then dine. But there are people that, that their dining experience for the evening is 3 to 4 hours.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's typically a group of people of 4 to 6.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And I think that, like the other night, I was with one of my best friends. Hadn't seen her in a long time. We stopped in at one of my favorite restaurants. We each had a glass of wine, and then we split a second glass of wine between us, and we had 2 appetizers between us, and we were done. We left, but
At
we
the
were
bar.
there in the bar for
Yeah.
an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And so, so those appetizers are a little more intricate, but they're not the kind that take forever to put together. They're not
Correct.
taking the time in the kitchen to assemble and expedite.
Yeah, they should be already, like if charcuterie, it'd be wrapped in, it's going to be wrapped in cellophane. It's already plated. Everything's on there. You just pull the cellophane and deliver it.
Right. Correct. Yeah. I'm thinking of another restaurant here in town that has a really famous happy hour, and they have a name for it, and it is their bar menu. The happy hour, you get certain, dollars off, but it is their bar menu that is also their happy hour. And that works really well because they have people in for the happy hour, and then people who still come in are dining with the bar menu. Now, the big mistake they make is that they still, even at happy hour, put the big dining menu behind the happy hour menu. And I don't think that needs to be done. I think it needs to be just taken off for good, and retraining the people there that this bar menu, which is pretty extensive, is what is served here. This is what's served here. If you want a dining experience with one of our amazing entrees, we have a whole big dining room and a whole big patio to take care of that for you. It's a big difference in revenue.
Yeah. And because, then it comes into play of how long is that seat being used for?
Right.
Are we turning the tables like we should properly? Is the bar turning twice a night, 3 times a night? Is the dining room turning twice a night? You see what I'm saying? I mean, that all comes into play. And again, it goes back to server training on how they conclude a dinner experience.
Correct.
And as well as I do that you have to do that properly so you're not offending anybody.
Well, and let me say another thought that just occurred to me about serving dinner or serving the entrees in the bar. is you end up with an expediter. You don't end up with a server. You end up with an expediter who brings out this whole bunch of stuff, and you've got to have steak knives, and you got to have all these special spoons, and then they're setting up this whole dinner for you at this smaller spaced bar, this
in an
countertop
18-inch
bar.
square.
Exactly. That if you're lucky. And the expediter just throws the food down and leaves, because that's what expediters do. And you don't really have a server who even is there to come check and say, okay, how's everything? Did you get everything? I'll check back in a couple minutes. You've got a bartender who's doing this, serving up all kinds of drinks, or being at the well, stuck at the well, doing things like that. They can't even look over at you and see if you got your food. So remember that the dining experience with the entrees and the salads and the amazing soups that you pour sometimes, those kinds of things, that needs to be an experience that is handled in the dining area by the experienced servers to really make it a memorable moment for the patron.
I agree.
Yeah. So then when I am working with people on cocktail table nibbles versus bar menu versus appetizers on the menu, I tend to be a person who says, let's not put many appetizers on the menu. We can put a few that may be your best sellers, but here's where that communication that you've talked about so much is so important. When a server recognizes that you've been at the cocktail table or you've been in the bar before you come to the dining table, it is an entirely different experience for somebody sitting down who's been in one of those revenue pods versus just coming in and being seated directly by the host or hostess at a dining room table. Correct. Yeah. And when I was in a restaurant recently, what was great about it was that we were in the bar, we finished up at the bar, we paid at the bar, which is something that you've always said is very important to do. Keep that tab separate. And then when we were seated, the server came up and said, I saw that such and so, the bartender, was taking care of you in the bar. So would you like another appetizer, or would you like to move into the salads? And that is such a great way to have that connection, even if it's just eye connection, so that you know what's happening with that patron's journey in your restaurant.
Yep. It's like being at the opera and having the second show come out.
Yes, indeed. Good example. Right. So how do you feel about the menus, Bruce, as far as appetizers on a dining room menu?
Again, when it comes to revenue pods, I think if it's a straight dining experience and the reservation was a dining reservation, I think it needs to be offered on the dining menu, but you don't need 10 different appetizers. Let that 10 different appetizer menu be at the bar menu.
I agree.
You're coming there for dinner, and if you have a 6-top and you went straight to dinner and you didn't go to the bar, then you would probably, the conversation may drum up, some appetizers. But I mean, I've seen concepts that have 15 different menus, 15 different items on their appetizer, and it's kind of senseless. Yeah, it's kind of senseless.
Right. I agree. And we all know that appetizers tend to be the higher revenue product.
Correct.
Well, compared to salads, I don't know. Salads are a high revenue impact as well.
They are.
But I like the fact that a server will ask about the appetizers and then focus on the salads. And I think it's a good idea to have a few options of salads there, not just one, not just two, not like, but give them a few options. And of course, they can upgrade with salmon or chicken or steak or whatever they want to add on to their salad. But it gives them that experience of where they're moving into a dining experience where they have more conversation with the server about what's available, what the specials are, what their favorites are as far as salads or soups go, what the soup of the evening is, that kind of thing, where you're not getting that, you're not having to deal with that at the bar.
Yes. Totally different experience.
Totally different experience.
And it's,
I like that.
that pot of revenue, as you know, works totally different from the bar menu, works totally different from the patio, which works totally different from, the little the little cocktail table that you're going to have. So it's
Right.
it all works together. And, again, as you know, training is key,
Training is key.
it's not something that you can put a team together and expect them to make it work in training in 3 days. It doesn't work.
No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And you know as well as I do, there's concepts out there that spend. I know there's one concept that typically spends $1 million to $1.5 million in training and opening
It is the
between
truth.
friends and family. Um, yeah, I mean, the openings, and why are they so successful? Well, when they open, they're ready to be open, and
Absolutely. It's
and when
not
they
like they're
open,
fumbling around.
correct. It's like they've been open for 10 years.
Correct. Correct. And then people who are there on the first few nights of service want to bring their friends back because they had such a great experience from the get
Correct.
go. And it's an even bigger deal because most people suffer through openings with people who have not trained their staff properly, do not have these kinds of operations in place. And
Correct.
it's a very bumpy ride. And then many times people will put up a bad Yelp review and never go back to the restaurant again. I
Correct.
can't even tell you how many times that happens.
Oh yeah,
This is
absolutely.
that opening week is paramount. You got to have your
Yes.
ducks in a row. Of course, there's going to be
Yes.
some stuff that gets a little caught up, but you've got to have your ducks in a row.
And
Absolutely. I was just thinking
when
about,
when
go
a
ahead.
concept opens, people, you know, typically people understand it's a new opening. But when they go
Hmm.
back the second time and it's no different than it was the first time, and there's still errors, and it's bad. And typically the people
Right.
don't come back.
Correct.
These companies, these big groups that spend $1.5 million in training, you know, that's some of the best money they can invest in their concept.
Hmm. Absolutely true. Well, you were just telling me you were at dinner with an owner that you've done many concepts with. He was having dinner with you at one of his concepts. And
Yes,
it is an 85-step process for a server at a table with each table.
correct,
That is a big deal.
correct.
And a lot of restaurant owners out there are probably thinking, 85 steps? What could that possibly be?
Yep.
And this isn't even the highest level of pricing in the area.
No,
This is a concept that is fine dining, but it's certainly not, it's certainly
it's
not
not.
prefix. It's not
No,
omakase.
no, and it's
And
not
they
Michelin
have
level.
85 steps in place.
Yes,
You can't put 85 steps in place in a server's head in 3 days.
no,
If you really have that kind of a system and strategy, and you have it for a reason because you've tested and tried it and tested and tried it, and you know that this is what works, then you want to have weeks of training with those servers and the hosts and the hostesses and the bartenders so that everyone understands the
yeah,
process.
and that's the concepts that are in the league of that do 1.1 to 1.5 million a month in sales, a
Correct.
month in sales, not a year.
Yes. Right. That is correct. Yeah.
And I know a lot of
And I
people
think
have a
you,
hard time. There's a lot of people that have a hard time understanding how does a restaurant do $1 million to $1.5 million a month. It happens every day. Concepts we
yes, it
design every
does.
day.
It does. Hundreds and hundreds of restaurants
Yes.
every day hit that mark. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too what you said in another episode. You said it's so important for the owner to be the most critical entity of the entire project
Yes.
because That owner knows what the concept is. That owner knows the feeling that they want to impart in every single patron leaving. And that owner needs to be on his or her toes, involved in what's happening in the operation so that they can quickly remedy what may be lacking so that you are creating a very, very smooth service.
Yes. And one of the biggest critics, the owners, when they're the biggest critics, those are the most successful concepts. And what they train their staff, they train their staff to act like owners. And
Very
so
true.
everybody's at the level of expertise, and they give the servers somewhat of a flexibility to enhance the dining experience in the best possible way.
True.
That's
They
what
do
I've
have some
experienced.
flexibility.
Yes.
Agreed. Instead of one of those emergency servers who's like, I forgot to put the order in, so can we make this free for them?
Yeah. No.
Not that. Not that.
No.
Okay. So I know we've kind of wandered off topic of the menus, but I think that all of you are understanding the importance of having these different revenue pods and how they all actually work together and how your operation works together to support those revenue pods along the way. And this is just one example. 3 different menus for 3 different scenarios that are building revenue for you in each of those scenarios. Do you want to add anything else, Bruce, before we call this a day?
It's pretty clear cut and dry. I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff. It's proving process. And, it's the shortcuts that are the downfall.
Correct. Yeah.
When it comes to ownership, there's a lot of operators out there that have their ways of doing it, and they've been successful at doing what they're doing, but you can't have 10 units working by the cuff of the you just can't throw it together every day.
Correct. Agreed.
So if
Yes,
you're a market, if you're a market like Laguna that knows the week that everybody goes out of town or the week that they come back, what follows the void there? What fills the void? So do you go out and try and get groups,
another revenue pod?
intertwined? Yes. And you try and sell, rooms, private dining rooms, and to fill the void. There's a lot of ways to fill the void.
I absolutely agree. And and this is also where I encourage restaurants to do what I call more of the joint ventures with their most loyal patrons. This is where they get their patrons to help them bring in new people and try it when it's a slower season and they're paying attention more to who they've got in the place instead of, a packed house in the middle of summer here. And so when you have those off seasons, then you have time to really build the loyal clientele and the local clientele that will continue to support you in those down times. It doesn't mean that you ignore them during the year in the busy seasons. They're still your loyal and locals that you love, but you are doing even more to keep them engaged and involved in your creative spirit and everything that you're providing through those, down months. It's a perfect plan. I mean, you were just saying something about group dining, which is another revenue pod. A restaurant today just sent out a notice in email about, spring has sprung. So now it's time to book your bridal showers, your engagement parties, your rehearsal dinners, your, all of these Mother's Day banquets, all these things. And I thought, well, how smart is that? They're the only restaurant I've seen do it in our town. We don't have 150 some concepts in this town, and they're the first one who came out with, hey, it's time to do your group dining. Here's all the reasons why, because spring and summer is happening, and these are all the occasions that are happening. So think about us for group dining. Well, that's perfect because we still have what we call kind of a shoulder season in April and all the way through really mid-May. So there's a good 6 weeks of quiet, and then it begins to build right into the summer season. And so it was a great little postcard to see. So
Perfect.
I think we've covered some things here. I think we're ready to move on to another episode. But we want to thank you all for being here. And again, please go to our YouTube channel to see the video podcast, or go to your favorite audio podcast platform and you'll find Mastering Restaurant Revenue every Tuesday morning. Just look up our YouTube, Mastering Restaurant Revenue, and like it, subscribe if you would, share the news. Share the news when you see it in social media. And we love the fact that you're bringing people in to hear how to increase your revenue and make your life as a restaurant operator, as a chef, even as a server, more enjoyable for you and for your patrons. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Excellent.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.